Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with a talk about boxes that are still kicking around. We've been doing a bunch of these, and here's one that really surprised me. Well, it didn't. I'm very happy it still exists. It's the Decca sound, the mono years, 1944 to 1956. Really a remarkable 12-year period in the history of recordings. Oh, it's a jack-in-the-box look, yeah. And this I think is around for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's mono, and so it doesn't have quite the appeal of some of the other boxes. And number two, it's very interesting because it's a label-based project. That is, it's not about artists and it's not about repertoire. It's about what Decca was doing. And so that's not going to have the kind of appeal for most people as something more obvious like the Heifetz edition or, one of those things. Got an itch there. Okay, so let's go through it, shall we? It's got lots of discs. I mean, oh my, how many are in here? 53 discs. 53 discs. That's a lot of recordings that they were making in that little 12-year period. You might not think so, but when you have it all in a box, it's really quite remarkable, especially when you look at what the repertoire is. So I have here, these are actually original jacket things. I'll just show you an original jacket so you can see that I'm not lying. There you go. Isn't it absolutely hideous? Yes, those are original jackets. And don't tell me some famous artist did them. Famous artists do hideous things too. And let's see, especially if they don't get paid very much. And here's the booklet, all about the Decca sound. Now, I actually believe that the Decca sound was not a huge, noticeably much better than anyone else's sound. Let's put it that way. But they got better. They got better as time went on. And of course, when stereo popped up, but we don't get to stereo. And there's some really interesting stuff in here. There really is. With some fine ensembles. I do want to make one point, though, before we get started. This has to do with the orchestral music. The orchestral music is rather an interesting case. First of all, there is always the sonic issue. Some of these things will sound better, some of them will sound worse. It depends on where they were recorded and who did it, and with what equipment, and all that stuff. All of those engineering issues apply, especially in the recordings from the 40s. In the 50s, things start to improve markedly, but there's that. But the other thing is this. You were dealing in this period with Europe rebuilding after World War II. Most of these orchestras had suffered some pretty serious depredations, and they just weren't sounding that great. As an ensemble, they weren't sounding that great. They were in a rebuilding phase. And even the ones who did sound pretty good were not very good to start with. What I mean is, you cannot judge them by modern standards. Those standards were inculcated, more or less, by Toscanini, beginning in the 1930s with his tours with the New York Philharmonic and whatnot. And how do we know this? We know this because we have the testimony of conductors like George Szell, who said, wow, we heard this orchestra. We had never heard playing of this quality before, and it set the standard for everything that we aspired to afterwards. That was really not a question. Yeah, some people liked certain qualities that these orchestras had. That is true. But the modern conception of orchestral sound was essentially the invention of Toscanini and some other of those guys who came to the U.S. and whipped those orchestras into shape. And those orchestras were not affected to the same degree by World War II because the U.S. was not fighting in Europe. And therefore, the American orchestras survived, sounding fabulous throughout this period. And so this is, and I don't want to hear any nationalist bullshit from European people out there, frankly. I love you dearly, European people. But these are facts. These are historical facts. And we just have to acknowledge them for what they are. It's not about who's better or who's worse for some stupid nationalistic reason. This is a very, very simple, pragmatic position. Orchestras were damaged by the war. Some orchestras were not damaged by the war. Some orchestras had amazing conductors who fled Europe during the war and stayed there into the U.S. and whipped those orchestras into shape, and most of the European orchestras did not. And so you're dealing with, if you're used to the modern concept of orchestral sound. After Toscanini, you had conductors like Karajan, for example, who built the Berlin Philharmonic into the powerhouse that it became. That standard that Toscanini set became the standard for most of the conductors who followed him. Even the ones who were Furtwänglerian, like Barenboim and people like that, they had the same standards of ensemble quality and precision, even if they were, very, very different conductors aesthetically and stylistically. It was a standard of playing. And that standard did not begin to become uniform and rise throughout Europe until the late 60s and early 70s, essentially. And so what we've got in these performances is some really grotty sounding orchestral playing, in addition to the sound issues. And we'll talk about that when we get to it. But I just want to make the point. These are very interesting performances by and large, and people will make records that they had to be in business and do things no matter what. But did they sound great? They did not. Quite often. Sometimes they did. There were some orchestras that also survived the war pretty much intact, such as the Paris Conservatoire Orchestra, which always sounded like itself. So they're wonderful to hear. These are the things that, this box sort of asks us to take into account. And I think it's a fascinating opportunity. That's why I'm so intrigued by this stuff. And we begin on disc 1, and we're going to go through this rather quickly, with, at least I hope we can, with some Ansermet stuff. Ansermet with the Orchestra de la Suisse Romande. Now, the Orchestra de la Suisse Romande in the 40s and 50s was bad. They were a very provincial orchestra. However wonderful Ansermet was, and however hard he worked to build them up, they were not great. They really weren't. But they were sort of the house orchestra of the Decca administration, because they were based in Geneva. And so, and in London, but in Geneva. And so they got the contract. So here we go. You ready? Stravinsky, Petrushka, and the Rite of Spring. Oh my, are these fallible performances. They are just timbrely sleazy, but fun. I mean, there's something to be said historically for listening to lousy performances of difficult music by inferior orchestras. There really is. It's very entertaining quite often, especially if you know how the thing ought to sound, and you get to hear a sense of how it all came to be. And that's fine. So I'm just telling you what it is. I'm not going to judge it that strictly. Then we have a wonderful disc of Roussel, the Complete Spider's Feast, and the Petite Suite for orchestra, and Ravel's Le Tombeau de Couperin and the Valse Noble et Sentimentale with Ansermet and the Orchestra de la Suisse Romande. And then we have more Ansermet on disc 3. Rachmaninoff's The Isle of the Dead, Ducas's La Pairie, shorn of its fanfare, it would seem, and the Debussy 6 Epigraphes Antiques, which were arranged by Ansermet, and Je. So that's all wonderful, but some of this stuff was with the Paris Conservatoire Orchestra. Yay! Let's see if I can tell, because they have these little teeny tiny, little tiny like stars and crosses and things that are supposed to help me to figure out who's doing what. Yes, so the Rachmaninoff and the Decca are the Paris Conservatoire. The rest is the Suisse Romande. CD4. We're dealing with Adolfo Argenta, a wonderful conductor who died very, very, way too soon. I mean, he really did. He died from carbon monoxide poisoning by running his car in his garage. I don't think anyone has suggested it was suicide, but whatever it was, it killed him. And so he recorded a lot of this stuff in stereo rather shortly after these performances were recorded. But let's see, we've got the Albanese Iberia, and we have Danzas Fantasticas, and wonderful bonus with the Paris, this is all with the Paris Conservatoire Orchestra. Yes. So much fun. Poulenc, Les Biches, the Suite, under Roger Desormières. Yeah, that's fun. Ooh, that's a great record. That's just a great record. And you get a picture of Argenta with Ansermet. There they are, sitting together, having a lovely chat. Then we have Munchinger. Oh, my goodness. Munchinger doing Haydn and Beethoven. Haydn's Clock Symphony and Symphony number 88, and the Beethoven Emperor Concerto with Backhaus and Clemens Krauss. Let's be clear who's doing that. Now the Beethoven we all kind of know, it's kind of stodgy, and the Haydn stuff is just also kind of stodgy. It is. I mean, Munchinger was not exciting. He just wasn't for the most part. Now here is a weird disc, CD6, Barinovich and Lotka. This is Krešimir Barinovich, who lived in 1975, The Gingerbread Heart, the Ballet Suite, and Fran Lotka, The Devil in the Village Suite. These are two suites from the Slavias. In other words, the Belgrade Philharmonic under Barinovich, the composer himself, is conducting, and the Orchestra of the National Opera House in Zagreb is with the composer conducting, Fran Lotka. And boy, do you not know these. These were recorded in 55, and, that's like really cool, frankly. It's fun. It's colorful. It's National Socialist stuff, and what the heck? You're not going to find that stuff anywhere else so quickly. And then we've got CD7, von Beinum. These have names. It's handy. The Bartók Concerto for Orchestra, a very, very famous recording. These are all with the Concertgebouw. And Willem Piper, his third symphony in one movement. It's only 13 minutes long. Interesting composer. Well worth hearing and getting to know. And the Alphonse Diepenbrock Marsyas Suite, incidental music, which is quite splendid. So we've got, where do we have? Oh, Clifford Curzon plays the piano in the Piper. It has a piano part. So there you go, with Edward von Beinum, which is in the big von Beinum box and all that stuff. But it's great. It's great to have. That's on Scribendum, by the way. It's not a Universal production. Why haven't they done a von Beinum box? Why? Okay. Arthur Bliss, a color symphony, and his introduction and allegro, and violin concerto. They're all conducted by Arthur Bliss. And the violinist in the concerto is Alfredo Campoli, who was one of the great violinists of the first half of the 20th century. Well worth listening to. You'll hear some more of him on here. And there was actually Universal Australia did a Campoli edition. And there's more stuff than that. There's like one of those 10-disc cheapy sets. And I have all that stuff. And we're going to talk about him at some point because he was a very major artist, important artist, and a wonderful violinist, by the way. So that's nice to have. Then we've got, get this, the Paris Conservatory Orchestra, conducted by Adrian Bolt. Yeah. Tchaikovsky Suite No. 3, the whole thing, which Bolt later redid in stereo. And the Love for Three Oranges Suite by Prokofiev and Lieutenant Kijé by Prokofiev, all conducted by Sir Adrian. Are they great performances? Nah, but they're fun. Fun to hear. It's okay. Vaughan Williams, London Philharmonic with Adrian Bolt. You get Job, his Mono Job, the Mono Job. Oh, it's Job, it's Bolt, it's wonderful, it's fabulous. And the Wasps, the whole suite. I mean, I think it's great having this stuff back. This is vintage stuff. I mean, the London Philharmonic was a very seedy sounding orchestra in the 50s. They really were. But it's still fun to hear this and play this repertoire. It really is. Then we have a whole Britten thing. Britten, Sinfonia de Requiem, the Diversions for Piano Left-Handed Orchestra, the 4C interludes in Passacaglia, and the Young Person's Guide to the Orchestra. So Julius Katchen is the pianist. The Danish State Radio Orchestra and London Symphony Orchestra are conducted by Benjamin Britten, and you also have the Concertgebouw Orchestra with von Beinum. And I am not untangling all this stuff with the little asterisks, these things here. With these, you see like the little tiny thingies that tell you who's doing what when you go back and match it to the repertoire. I mean, they just were lazy and didn't want to print who was doing what under each group of works, which pisses me off. All right, that's just cheap. CD12, Campoli again, doing Kreisler and Paderewski and Wieniawski and, little violin sniglets. I'm not a sniglet guy, I've told you. I mean, but, the playing is charming and delightful. And as a bonus, you get the Symphonie Espagnole by Lalo. Ugh! Oh, I hate that piece. I've told you a million times why. But here it is with the London Phil under von Beinum. Why not? So you've got this, and it's the whole 5 movements, all 5 interminable movements of it. So there you go. And then we've got more Campoli, and this time with Adrian Bolt, the Elgar Violin Concerto. This is a very fine Elgar Violin Concerto, and I particularly like the finale because it's only 17 minutes long as opposed to like 25 or whatever people usually do with it. It's really quite different sounding. It's a fresh, almost pre-war vision of the Elgar. It's quite wonderful. And then you've got Butterworth, a Shropshire lad, Banks of the Green Willow, Bax's Tintagel. Oh, you Baxians! Space travel had already been restored by the end of the war, and the Baxians were back. And Holst, the Perfect Fool Ballet Suite with the London Phil. These are our classic performances, and it's delightful to have them back. It really is. And it was wonderful to hear them. I mean, I just remember I wasn't around in the 50s, obviously, but maybe not so obviously. Some of you were, I know. But it was exciting to have this repertoire available. It really was. Even when I was younger and growing up, and I could see that they were reissued on like Eclipse and, some of these mono reissue things. And it was music we'd never heard of, and it wasn't recorded often. And we never had a chance to hear it live. And thank God that they did it when they could, with a conductor, frankly, who was to the manner born. He knew the composers, he knew the repertoire, he had unquestionable authority. And so that's really, really wonderful. Then we've got Walton Facade, along with the Facade Suites and the Constant Lambert Horoscope Ballet Suite, which is rather cool. The Facade speakers are Edith Sitwell and Peter Pears. It is the reference recording of Facade. It's absolutely classic. And Peter Pears's voice sounds strange even when he's speaking, never mind when he's singing. Let us come to the drums out of Babylon, glum in the sun. It's weird. It's okay. And then we've got Anthony Collins is conducting that, and Robert Irving is doing the Constant Lambert stuff. And then we have Elgar and Vaughan Williams, the introduction at Allegro by Elgar, and the Serenade for Strings, and Falstaff by Elgar, and the Tallis Fantasia. And this is all Anthony Collins stuff, so it's all in the Anthony Collins box. And it's a hell of a lot better than his Sibelius. Let's just put it that way and let it go at that. The Amadeus Quartet in their early days with Clifford Curzon and Dennis Brain. Now, these are classic performances. The Mozart Piano Quartets 1 and 2, which are marvelous, and they're marvelous pieces. Oh, my God, I got to do a talk about those. They're terrific. And the Horn Quintet with Dennis Brain. Now, that's fun. Now, the Horn Quintet is with the Griller Quartet, not the Amadeus, but the Griller Quartet was also a wonderful group that didn't survive into the stereo era much, I don't think. A little bit, maybe. I think I talked about some of their other stuff, like their Haydn and whatnot. But it's delightful to have this stuff from back in their prime. Brahms, Piano Concerto No. 1 with Curzon and the Concertgebouw and Bynum. What's not to love? I mean, he did it again in stereo with Cell. It was even more to love. But it's lovely. And the Beethoven Fourth Symphony with Joseph Cripps and the Concertgebouw. Then we've got this conductor no one's ever heard of, Robert Denzler, whose stuff has been reissued by Australian Eloquence. You get the Honegger Third Symphony, the Chant de Joie, and then these two pieces by Conrad Beck, his Viola Concerto, and Bernard Reichel, his Concertino for Piano and Orchestra, which are completely forgettable, but they're played by the Paris Conservatoire Orchestra. So that's fun to hear. And the other two pieces are with the Orchestra de la Suisse Romande, and they don't sound so great, the two concerto things. But the Honegger stuff is with the Paris Conservatoire and Denzler. And then we've got Misha Elman and Schulte, the Beethoven Violin Concerto with Misha Elman and the London Philharmonic and Schulte. That's fun. And Haydn's Symphony No. 102 with Schulte for some reason. That's not too memorable, but not terrible, not horrible. And now we have Christian Ferras, who I've been talking about a lot lately, and so have you. So he's gotten more than his share of, I think, attention now. We should all be happy. Very happy. The Brahms Violin Concerto. And then let's see what else have we got. That's with the Vienna Philharmonic and Karl Schuricht. And then we've got the Federico Elizalde Violin Concerto and the Rodrigo Concerto d'Estio for violin and orchestra. And that's with the London Symphony under Gaston Poulet and the Paris Conservatoire conducted by Georges Enescu, no less. How's that for historical? It really is. It's wonderfully historical. Then Anatole Fistulari. Yes, Fistulari. We've got Strauss's Graduation Ball Ballet Suite and the Gluck Ballet Suite number 1, arranged by Felix Mottl. The other one of these, Strauss, is arranged by Antal Dorati. And Grétry's Ballet Suite, arranged by Constant Lambert. And that's all wonderful. It's with Anatole Fistulari and Robert Irving with the new Symphony Orchestra of London, which then, as now, is a pickup ensemble. And we have more Fistulari, Tchaikovsky, the Nutcracker Suite number 1. It's the suite as we know it. And then there's a suite number 2 that has like more Nutcracker stuff that we don't usually get. And then Sleeping Beauty Suite. This is all with the Paris Conservatory Orchestra with Fistulari and Roger Desormières. Yay! From what? This is around 51. Yeah, 1951. These were recorded. This is not chronological, by the way. You know, it's all over the place. Then we have Pierre Fournier, Brahms Cello Sonatas 1 and 2, and a Bach Viola da Gamba Sonata in G major, BWV 1027. That's with Fournier, Wilhelm Bachhaus in the Brahms stuff, and Ernest Losch in the Bach. Of course, it's with a piano, not a harpsichord, and he's not playing a gamba, and we don't care. And then we have Maurice Gendron. Remember him? Mr. Gendron or Gendron or Gendron or however they pronounced it. The Schubert Arpeggione Sonata, the Schumann Fantasia Stucke, Dry Romanzen, and the Schumann Cello Concerto. This is all with Jean Francais, playing the piano in the pieces with piano, and Ansermet and the Suisse Romande in the orchestral pieces. The Griller Quartet, they're back. Yes, this is major stuff. This is important historical stuff and fabulous music. Ernest Bloch, string quartets 1 through 4. Yay, it's all here. Yay, I'm so excited. These are major, major works. Big works, difficult works, sort of Bartók gnarly works, and really, really good music. And these are wonderful performances. I just am thrilled that this stuff is available. I don't care if I have to buy the whole box to get it. I'm getting it. Bloch's quartets are a major, major contribution. All of his chamber music is too. The piano quintet, wow, it's fabulous. Really, really fine stuff. He was such a good composer. It was totally ignored. And so it's wonderful to have these performances back. And then we've got Friedrich Goldar doing Beethoven. Now, we have talked about Goldar's Beethoven. And in this particular, it's a sample. You get the Hammerklavier. This is his mono Decca cycle. The Eroica Variations and Les Adieux sonatas. And they're lovely. You may prefer his remake even more. I do personally, but it's Goldar. It sounds like Goldar. It's that hard-edged, clear, somewhat, it's exciting and rhythmically very, very sharp and crystalline. And I enjoy his Beethoven. I really do. Quartetto Italiano, old Quartetto Italiano recordings. Haydn, Opus 64, number 6. Boccherini, string quartet in D major, Opus 6, number 1. Schumann, second string quartet, and the Verdi Quartet. This is the early Quartetto Italiano. They sort of bopped around. They were on Decca, they were on EMI. Then they finally landed on Philips, and the rest, as they say, is history. We're all the way up to CD 29, so we're over halfway there, folks. Hang in there. Take a breath. I'm just moving along. Okay, Sibelius, the Lemminkainen Suite, and the Karelia Suite with the Danish State Radio Orchestra and Thomas Jensen. Oh, they sounded bad. The sonics are just mediocre. The performances are okay. There is nothing here we need to revisit. Sorry. And I grew up with everyone talking about, Eric Tuxen and Jensen, and they were fabulous, and Nielsen and Sibelius, and that's what they did. And it was the classic this and the historical that. Then I listened to them and just went, ugh. Ooh, no. Kleiber doing Beethoven's Last Symphony. Because if you think I'm sticking a picture of me in a tie saying what it is in the middle of this whole hilaria that I have to find and edit it and put it, no. It's the last of the Beethoven symphonies, and you know which one it is, so I don't have to tell you. And then we've got Beethoven and Wagner, the Pastoral Symphony, and the Tristan and Isolde Prelude and Liebestod, and the Parsifal Good Friday spell. Okay, so some of this, let's see, the Beethoven is with Erich Kleiber, as was the previous disc, and the Wagner stuff is with Clemens Krauss, which is lovely. Then we've got Knappertsbusch. Now, Knappertsbusch just was issued by Eloquence in Australia, so that's recent, and I just have the Scribendum Knappertsbusch boxes. There's so much Knappertsbusch out there, but this bit of it is Bruckner 3 and the Tannhäuser Overture and Venusberg music with the Vienna Philharmonic, and these performances do indeed reveal just how bad the Vienna Philharmonic sounded in the immediate post-war period, at least under Knappertsbusch. I mean, it's not unlistenable, but okay. Then we have the Koppel Quartet. Now this is cool. Hombo String Quartet number 3, Nielsen String Quartet number 4, and the Sibelius Voces Intime. Wow, isn't that great? With the Griller Quartet doing the Sibelius, by the way. Fabulous stuff. Really great stuff. The chamber music stuff in here is just priceless. It really is. And much more important than the orchestral stuff, I have to say. Then we have, let's see, Lindenberg. Edward Lindenberg conducting. Here's a household name for you. Doing the Bizet, Jeu d'Enfant, and the suite from the Jolie Fille de Perth. And then you've got Chabrier's Suite Pastorale, an Ode à la Musique, with Janine Michaud, soprano. Ooh, she's great. And excerpts from Le Roi Malgré Lui, and a bonus in the Debussy La Demoiselle Élue. And that's with Jean Fournet, but the rest is with the Paris Conservatory Orchestra and Eduard Lindenberg. Give it a shot. What the heck? Maura Limpany. Good old Maura Limpany. This stuff's been reissued 7 billion times. The Rachmaninoff Third, the Cacciatorian Piano Concerto with Anthony Collins and with Fistulari, and it's just lovely. Then we've got Peter Mogg, who's also just been reissued. See, one of the problems with this set is that if you've been buying those Eloquence boxes, then this one is going to be a bit redundant. It really is. I mean, this one, yeah. But still, I mean, if you don't want all those boxes, this might be a good way to sample the stuff. So you've got Mogg doing Mozart, and we don't need to get into which Mozart. I mean, it doesn't matter. Well, it's the Serenade number 4, Symphonies 28 and 29, so what the heck. Then we have Nikita Magaloff doing Granados Goyescas. Now, that's fun. I mean, Magaloff was a good pianist, and he's not overly represented now, and Goyescas is a masterpiece, which also isn't ridiculously overrepresented, especially by non-Spanish pianists. So why not? Give it a try. And Jean Martinon. Here we go. Lalo Namuna, Suite number 1 and 2. And Fauré, the Ballade for piano and orchestra. And 2 nocturnes, 3 nocturnes, 4 nocturnes. And the Jean Francais Concertino for piano and orchestra with Kathleen Long and the London Phil under the young Jean Martinon, just getting himself started and feeling his oats. Then we've got the Boyd Neal Orchestra doing Handel, the 12 Concerti Grossi, Opus 6, and they're all here. Yeah. And you also get the water music, suites 1 through 3, or the whole water music. This is with the Boyd Neal Orchestra under Boyd Neal, and the illustrious Thurston Dart playing the continuo. As if it matters who plays the continuo. But, I mean, it's really rather cool because he became an early music, authority. And there he is doing the continuo with the Boyd Neal Orchestra. Again, classic performances. By today's standards, they're rather slow and heavy, to be honest with you, and kind of thick sounding, but what the heck, Who's counting? Then we've got Zara Nelsova, the cellist. We're already up to disc 42, so we're in the home stretch. The Rachmaninoff Cello Sonata, the Kodály Sonata for solo cello, the Max Reger Suite number 2 for unaccompanied cello, and 2 movements from the Bach Cello Suite number 3 in C major, the 2 bourrées. So that's Zara Nelsova with Artur Balsam piano, who was one of the great chamber music pianists of the 20th century. Just a splendid, splendid artist and an incredibly sensitive partner. So this is really cool. Nelsova was a wonderful cellist. She had a big, beefy tone. She was really known for not being typically feminine, which is good as a player. She just sounded like a great cellist. He didn't make any excuses because she was female. But this was at a time when there weren't that many female cellists buzzing around, so how wonderful that was. Now we have a really cool disc by something called the Quintetto Chigiano, or Chigiano, or something like that, Chigia. Well, here it is. You can look at it yourself. There they are. And they're doing really interesting repertoire. The Shostakovich Piano Quintet, which was rather new at the time this was recorded, and the Ernest Bloch Piano Quintet No. 1, which is a masterpiece in Frankian cyclical form, full of acerbic harmonies, and it's robust and exciting, and it's unbelievable. This is the first international Decca CD release, and I don't blame them a bit. I understand. And here they are again, doing Boccherini's Piano Quintet in A major. He actually did write some keyboard quintets. And then one in D minor. These are all Opus 57, Boccherini's Opus 57, and the Brahms Piano Quintet. So these are really worth hearing. This is an Italian group. It was Riccardo Brengola, Mario Benvenuti, Giovanni Leoni, Lino Filippini, and Sergio Lorenzi. They were the Chigianos. Chigianos. Oh, it's an Italian CH, so it's Chigiano. Yeah, Chigiano. That's, I guess, how you would pronounce it. Well, whatever. And then we've got, Ruggiero Ricci, Paganini Violin Concertos 1 and 2 with Anthony Collins. It's in the Ricci box. It's in the Collins box. It's in the Collins and the Ricci box. It's in every box. Every single box has it in there. There you go. Schulte doing more stuff. Mozart 25, Mozart Prague Symphony, and Rossini Overtures with the London Symphony Orchestra. But the Rossini Overtures, oh good, are the Piero Gamba performances. I remember those. Oh, those are fun. Those are so much fun. The Schulte stuff is rather forgettable, but the Gamba, that's better. Then we've got more Schulte. Bartók, Kodály, and Haydn. So you've got Bartók, music for strings, percussion, and celesta. His mono stuff was not nearly as good as his stereo remakes in London. Never mind his digital remakes in Chicago, which were inferior to the stereo remakes in London. And then Kodály Hari János and the Haydn Military Symphony, all with the London Phil. And they're kind of rough and ready performances. They really are. I've heard better, and so have you. The Trio di Trieste, they were famous. A wonderful chamber group, another lovely Italian group, the Beethoven Archduke and the Brahms Piano Trio No. 1. Lovely stuff to have. And Eric Tuxen, well, here he is. Prokofiev 5, Sibelius 5, with the Danish State Radio Symphony Orchestra under Eric Tuxen. Oh, they sound like hell. Bloch. They just sound terrible. The sound is lousy, and the orchestra is missing like its whole percussion section half the time. Oh, it's just terrible, just terrible. And here's Jensen, Thomas Jensen, and Mogens Voldke. Remember him? You get Nielsen 5, and his flute concerto and the clarinet concerto. Those are with Voldke. With Gilbert Jesperson, flute, and Ib Eriksson, clarinet. Now, the wind concertos are much better than the symphony. The symphony, again, boy, their playing just was not up to snuff. It wasn't. There's no point in pretending otherwise. You could say, oh, I like the way he shapes it. I like the conception. There's no conception that justifies lousy sound and bad playing. Or just inferior playing. I'm not saying they're playing badly for what they could do, but it's just not up to par. Now we have the Verdi Quartet. Wonderful. Smetana Quartet No. 1, Kodály String Quartet No. 2, Schubert No. 13 with the vintage Veg. Wonderful stuff. You know it. I know it. And finally, is this the end? Disc 52? No, there's more, of course, with the Wiener Octet. The Wiener Octet is doing Mozart's Divertimento No. 17 and the Divertimento No. 10. That's led by Willy Boskovsky, the famous, Vienna Phil concertmaster and Strauss conductor person. So that's fun. And then the Mendelssohn Octet and the Brahms Clarinet Quintet with Alfred Boskovsky clarinet, who must be related to the other Boskovsky. And that's the end. That's the whole thing. That's CD 53. Did I say there were 53 things to start with? I don't even remember how we got to this point. I think I must have, because that's how many there are. Yeah, 53. So there you go. Decca's mono years. I think this is a wonderful selection of repertoire. Yes, not all the performances are good. You know it. I know it. It's the way it goes. But it is a wonderful historical snapshot of a a fabulous and interesting period in the history of the gramophone, as Europe was in its rebuilding phase, as technology was changing literally by the day. And to have this box, I think, is you dip into it. Every so often, pull something out and just listen to it and enjoy. I find it enormously pleasurable. I mean, I got it when it first came out, which was really quite a few years ago at this point. Let me see. What's the date? 2015. Yeah. So it's been around for a while, and it's still around, which is like a miracle. I'm just letting you know. What you want to do from that point is up to you. So keep on listening, friends. Take care.